Hello and welcome to another episode of the Addiction Pharmacy Podcast. Today's episode, our podcast guest is Mr. Raven Ariola, who currently serves as an operations consultant and scientific advisor for cannabis production facilities, dispensaries, and startups through his firm Entheo Wellness. Holding a master's degree in medical cannabis science and therapeutics, Raven brings to us his knowledge regarding responsible legislation, cannabis research, harm reduction, as well as patients' rights, all while bridging the educational gap between the various parties involved in this emerging space. Addiction Pharmacy is grateful to have Raven as a guest and colleague and excited to hear him discuss the issues around cannabis therapy. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. So Raven Ariola, thank you for being on the Addiction Pharmacy Podcast.
No, thanks. Thank you for having me.
In looking at your bio and reading it out, I do believe that your mission is very similar to ours here at Addiction Pharmacy. Your goals of providing education, awareness, advocacy in plant-based holistic medicine, working for harm reduction out there really lines up with what we want to do. So we are really excited and glad to have you to share some of your experiences with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm incredibly proud to be and honored to be involved. I mean, like you said, my mission aligns well with what you're doing here at Addiction Pharmacy. So thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you. So, as a consultant and a scientific advisor for the cannabis industry, just to get us rolling, share with us some things that have kept you busy lately and what you've been up to.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I really like to kind of dive in and get into the nitty gritty nuts and bolts science of cannabis. With consulting in regards to operations and startups, what I try to do is I try to educate forward-thinking entrepreneurs, executives, and healthcare professionals in how the plant's either cultivated, processed, tested, dispensed, or in some cases even used. So my overall goal, is to try to lay out the research in a way that empowers business owners and medical professionals to make informed and ethical decisions with cannabis.
Great, because I think a lot of the public opinion about the cannabis industry, especially from folks that I work with, is that there's um, a lot of capitalistic overtones to the industry that may or may not be scientifically advised, and I don't think people are aware of the work that goes into having a seed to sale type of industry. So the work that you're doing really ensures that the science is there to help drive this business model.
I definitely appreciate that. Like you said, there's a kind of a branch between where the business is going and the capitalistic kind of quote unquote industry versus the scientific research and also the policy on the back end. Unfortunately, I believe the science and the policy is just not quite up to speed with how fast the industry is going.
Mhm.
Um, as far as what keeps me busy, I try to stay within the realm of consulting on from a scientific aspect. That can be everything from developing training to that's rooted in evidence-based medicine for either dispensaries or facilities, either going into putting out the product or making it. Or what I've been doing a lot lately is trying to help cultivators test their plant genetics to make sure that they are actually growing what they want before they spend the resources on it. Sometimes we can test to see if they have any particular plant viruses that can affect growth or even end up in the final product. So we try to protect consumers in that sense as well. I can get real into detail about the genetics process of it, but I'm not going to bore you with that.
Okay, we'll
Um,
save that for another discussion.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, One thing I've been trying to do a lot lately is leaning more towards the education aspect. I've found that education is kind of a powerful form of advocacy. So lately, I've been involved with the Harrington Institute, and our goal there is to try to build equity in disenfranchised communities that have been uprooted by the war on drugs, be able to get students that are actually skill ready and develop their skills and put them in a professional sense within the cannabis industry. And I think that's really aligning with their mission to kind of educate the masses on that.
Oh, that's great. That sounds like a grassroots, if you don't mind, kind of idea that will bring the education, as you mentioned, the work to where it needs to be, and really, from my experience, a better appreciation and respect for what this plant can do. as opposed to seeing it from a war on drugs, as you mentioned, perspective, and all of the social, red flags and as a pariah within a community, how this drug can be seen. And it's comforting to hear you talk about the industry utilizing skills and what you can bring, and ensuring that a safe product is available, which is one of the major criticisms of the illegality of the drug, and then maintaining the illicit market and the products that spawn from there.
Yeah, I can definitely understand where those concerns come from, especially because the kind of the third party testing category, that organization and that business model was incredibly cutthroat and competitive. So it makes sense as to why a lot of labs I don't want to say anything about any labs, of course, but it makes sense as to why some labs might want to test the potency results better than others, or might want to skew results in a certain way that makes all of the safety behind cannabis as a whole questionable at best.
Yeah.
Because I mean, we look towards the research for safety, and that's it seems to be largely safe from what we understand, but a lot of the unsafe aspects are what go into it during some of the processes. Once that's federally legal and decriminalized, hopefully we can look forward to standardization.
Sure, and I believe that's what's missing, the standardization ability across the industry, where the safety and constituency of the plant would no longer be questioned, wouldn't be part of the issue at all.
Exactly.
So, speaking about the plant, from what you're seeing from your work, daily work, are we treating the plant respectfully? Are we utilizing it to its potential? And is the sky still the limit for this as a medicine?
I'm a firm proponent that it's not legal in the true sense until everyone who needs it has access to it. So in that regard, I don't believe we're doing the plant very much justice. I don't believe we're doing it the respect that it deserves. Um, but we have, I mean, in the past 10 years or so, there's been over 27,000 studies into the medicinal research behind the plant and its constituents. So we're getting there. We just have 60 years of catching up to do due to prohibition.
Yeah, and a lot of people that I work with, those thousands of studies are unknown to them. So it's still perceived as a area that's not researched well.
Exactly. And truth be told, looking at some of the research we have from, 50, 40, 50 years ago, even 20 years ago, not all of it's completely relevant to the cannabis we see today, kind of due to what you mentioned earlier, kind of the profit driven, the productivity driven marketplace has produced THC levels that are way higher than they would normally be in the past 20 levels or so.
Yeah, and data continuously references the quest for the THC king plant, where that was the one of the few extracts that were recognized, identified as the active component. So most of the research focused on THC. So as we've progressed with our technology, and maybe you can share with us a little bit more about some of the other plant constituents or cannabinoids, as well as other chemicals that we're seeing within the plant, and what we can look forward to there.
Definitely. I want to first piggyback off of what you said about advancing the technology with a fun anecdote I once heard. Initially, during the isolation of THC, Dr. Raphael Mechoulam, the initial compound that they isolated from cannabis was actually CBN. And we now know CBN, due to research, has like sedative effects, anti-inflammatory, anti-convulsant effects, but most notably sedative. So at that time, for a very short period, it was thought that CBN was actually the psychoactive component. However, CBN's technically a degradant of THC. So due to their isolating and testing protocols, the THC they initially isolated had degraded into CBN by the time they identified the molecular structure. So I think that's kind of interesting.
Oh yeah.
In regards to what else we've seen, of course, like there's THC and CBD, the two most dominant ones. I'm not gonna bog down your podcast too much with that because there's a wealth of information that they can definitely find on that. But there's also CBC, CBG, but then there's also all the varins like CBDV, CBGV, THCV. There's not a lot of research into those yet, but it is coming out. research into THC, of course, is indicating that we have, anti-inflammatory properties, antioxidant, neuroprotective properties, I believe, are some of the ones with the most powerful medicinal implications moving into the future. CBD, of course, has well-documented forms of anti-anxiety, pain relief, immunosuppressant. However, there's still a little bit of liver toxicity that the research is indicating, and this is another reason why it's important to have research, is so we can understand that they're not end-all, be-all panaceas of medication. Like we have to be mindful that they might have side effects, that they might have certain things. So liver toxicity is definitely worth looking into when it comes to CBD products. But like I said, we also see some other naturally occurring ones in small amounts like CBG and CBN.
Is the industry or the dispensaries increasing the supply of these other cannabinoids within their products?
I'm glad you asked. I'm glad you asked. I did a little bit of a study myself, and I went to a few different dispensaries, and I called around and I visited. And CBD flower is like it's non-existent at any of the Pennsylvania medical dispensaries that I visited or contacted. You can go to like a quote unquote CBD store. You can go to a glass store, a vape store, a tobacco store, and all of them have some form of CBD available. With that said, it does kind of bring into the question of the regulatory aspect. As you may know, all the CBD has flooded the market because of the 2018 Farm Bill, which allowed the legal production of hemp and CBD. With that, the only thing that it banned was Delta-9 THC specifically. So because of that, all of these other kind of minor cannabinoids like Delta-8, Delta-10, HHC, etc., in addition to CBD, are all being synthesized from CBD. One thing that's kind of neat about like the cannabis science is that naturally, without any human intervention, CBG biosynthesizes, CBGA biosynthesizes into CBD or THC just with the naturally occurring processes within the plant. So using similar type processes, manufacturers have been able to manipulate CBD in order to form Delta-8 THC. And Delta-8 is similar, but not the same as Delta-9 in that the double bond, as opposed to being right here on the 9th carbon, it's actually on the 8th carbon.
If the chemists were interested, could they convert CBD into Delta-9?
That's a great question. I very well believe that could be the case. I think that's a lot of the time with some of these products. I believe THCO, the THC acetate, THC is used in that process to make it.
Okay.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong there, but to my understanding, that's how it's made. So I believe that a lot of the time during this process, THC is an intermediate step. So they would be able to convert CBD to THC.
Not that there's any real need for that. I'm just kind of trying to get a little handle on the process. So, for everybody who's listening, the sudden abundance of Delta-8 and its prevalence everywhere alongside CBD as a legal product. And again, you referenced the Hemp Act, which kind of produced that loophole that led to the formation of Delta-8, just a double bond off Delta-9. But here we are with a product that is outside of the regulatory channels of the DEA. So now we're seeing Delta-8, which approaches Delta-9 as a cannabinoid, but is basically just governed by the laws of supplemental materials and is sold right alongside CBD in all these retail outlets, correct?
Exactly. And CBD isn't even to be sold. CBD, naturally occurring cannabinoid, of course, isn't to be sold under the umbrella that it's secure or anything. There could be no medical claims, of course, on any of that. Because of that, it kind of falls not within the realm of the FDA to make too many. It doesn't fall within the FDA's authority until those claims are really made. They largely fly under the radar. However, a lot of studies will research the CBD products that are available online or at your local gas station or at your local vape shop, wherever you're going. And a lot of those are either under labeled, over labeled, or there's no CBD, or there's THC, or there's melatonin. There's just a wide variety of compounds that are found in these um, just because they're currently unregulated. And then it kind of branches off and it creates a couple different concerns for me personally. And now I want to first preface this with saying, like we talked a little bit about Arrowwood earlier, I'm no stranger to legal highs. Those are always going to be on the market no matter what. If there's a loophole, someone has found it. With that said, all of these products that are coming onto the market are coming on so fast that we don't necessarily, the only research we have might be just that it was synthesized in the 50s, or that we might have a little bit of research indicating medicinal benefits for vomiting that's been completely put into like an advertising model. And if we want to kind of ensure the safety of these products, we can even look towards let's look at the medicinal Delta 9 model, for instance. All those products in the dispensary, despite not having CBD, CBG, CBC, CBN, any of the other minor naturally occurring cannabinoids that may not only might have a medicinal benefit, but also contribute to the overall cannabis experience. Those products, despite not having those cannabinoids, are at least tested by a third-party lab, which is registered with the state. The state's going to require certain regulations on that lab. Are they ISO certified? Are they GLP, et cetera, to make sure that they're doing their testing correctly. Now, where the fallacy lies is there's not too much standardization, or it's questionable what is correct whenever we talk about what's testing cannabis. There's a lot of labs that are figuring it out as they go. There's a lot of, even if it were to be, even the standard accepted practices of, let's say, potency or something is highly variable. So lab test results aren't exactly a great indicator that the product is entirely what you're told. And it gets into a really hairy situation because there's a certain level of uncertainty that consumers accept if they start moving towards, the unregulated market coming into CBD. And then as we move into Delta 8 or Delta 10 or THCO and some of these semi-synthetics that are, synthetically formed from a naturally occurring cannabinoid, everything's out the door at that point. Who knows what's in that cartridge?
Yeah, so there's potential for confounding evidence and just confusion and misinformation and misunderstanding down the line when we get
Exactly.
all these various products and all these various components that are being pulled out of the plant, which is a challenge, and which is why we're grateful to have someone in your position to be overseeing this and really working towards that insurance and advocating for this plant within an industry that can potentially lead the way in this medicine being truly medicine for the things that people are looking for. From my perspective in helping folks on a day-to-day basis, speaking with physicians who are curious or believe in THC and CBD products and their usefulness over traditional pharmaceutical drugs in the areas of pain or anxiety control.
Mm-hmm.
We hope that we can start to count on the standardization and what some of these medicines can bring. I know in the medical community that's a fundamental standard that they need to have to begin to feel confident in using these drugs and helping their patients.
Exactly. I agree with that wholeheartedly. It gets a little bit, I find it difficult to really apply any type of research standards or let's say the gold standard of randomized controlled trials to cannabis as a medicine due to so much unique variability between the product you're receiving. We can thank partially the entourage effect, but also partially the user's biology and their own personal experience they bring to it. I think that's a huge contributor of why every strain of cannabis, every different type of product and formulation affects everyone predictably, but albeit different. So I think that that's part of the reason why it's hard to find that standardization in terms of therapeutic value. But I think we can definitely start to look at the herbal pharmaceutical industries and other types of plant-based industries in terms of actually standardizing our cannabinoid extractions, our sampling procedures, our heavy metal testing, even things down to our water usage and stuff like that. I know it's a tight-lipped industry. Everyone wants to kind of keep their own protect their own personal trade secrets and everything. But when it comes down to it, we do have to communicate, and that's where the real science is done. Whenever I'm able to test it this way and you're able to replicate it that way. I mean, the current practice with potency testing is I'm going to destroy the sample upon testing. And if I destroy the sample upon testing, no one can retest this to determine what the potency was. And with that said, I mean, a lot of the time we want to test, let's say, 250 milligrams or so for a 25-pound batch. Depending on where that tiny pinch is pulled from, the potency is going to look completely different across the whole 25-pound batch as it's distributed across the state.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I like the mention there of the entourage effect. I know a lot of prominent researchers in the field discuss that with consistency and the individual responses, as well as the other makeup of the plant that we haven't touched upon yet, such as the terpenes and the flavonoids, and our growing understanding of that, in addition to the combination of these various cannabinoids within the plant and how they may synergize or work together. So I think that would really set us up for another conversation, Raven. I think I'd like to hear more about the entourage effect, and I know you can share with us a discussion on terpenes that more people are becoming aware of. And I think we can really provide an interesting talk on that. In addition to some things that we'll learn in the interim, the two of us. So maybe we can bring back some information and share and have a great discussion upon our next podcast. So Raven, I thank you for all of that great information. And I look forward to talking with you very soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me. If you have any questions, of course, reach out.
All right. Thank you and take care.
Thanks.
Many thanks to Raven Ariola for lending his time and expertise to our podcast. As a topic that begs for answers to so many questions, we're truly lucky to have him as a friend and associate, and are working together to bring additional information on this topic to coming podcasts. So again, thank you, Raven. Please, listeners, post comments, questions under the podcast here, and please subscribe to the Addiction Pharmacy podcast channel. Thank you.